Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means we're into the Hillsdale Dialogue. Specifically, we're on part 12 of The Republic with Dr. Daniel O'Toole, who teaches this at the Hillsdale College, and President Larry Arnn on your screen right there, who is president of Hillsdale College. That's Dr. O'Toole. That's Dr. Arnn. So, Dr. Arnn, last week when we left off, you were saying the constant tension in this book is that Plato says is messaging, read all the way through to the end. Well, we're now in book 6, and we're holding up the Philosopher King. It's not the end, but is it the top of the book? Is it the key point in the book?
I don't know. I think Dan should answer that. It's a very
peak.
high point.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, until you understand the whole thing, you know, I mean, first of all, we establish when we talk about the Philosopher King, the fundamental political question is who should rule? And the answer in America is the one picked by those who are governed, right? And there are profound prudential reasons for that. And, you know, the constitutionalism of America is the greatest commentary on that claim. Now, however, the competing claim is the one who knows what to do, right? He should rule. Yeah. And obviously, you know, I mean, General McClellan in the Civil War was a really good general, and the troops loved him, and he could move those troops around like crazy. And Robert E. Lee, who always beat him, by the way, praised him as the best. The trouble was he didn't win. and Grant did. Grant was the better general. Sherman may be the best of all. And so the point is, who should command the troop? Yep. The one who can do it the best, right? Not the one who's picked. And you can see in the picking of generals in America that a mixture happens between these two competing claims. The constitutional order produces one kind of claim and one kind of authority and one kind of sovereignty, and that gives the president commander-in-chief job. But then he's got to pick a general who can win, and those things alternate.
Oh,
right?
and our greatest president took half dozen swings at the plate before he came up with Grant. Dr. O'Toole, I'm going to go back to the first question. Book 6, there are 10 books in the Republic. We're in book 6. Yeah, but I don't think they were originally divided into 10 books. I don't know. Is this the central claim of the Republic, that philosophers should govern, should be kings?
Yeah. I think the passage at 473 is the most important passage in the dialogue, or the peak of the dialogue, or arguably there are two peaks. So the first peak is the claim that you can have private and public happiness only when philosophers rule in the cities. And so that's the ultimate political promise underlying the building up of the entire city and speech. I'll just say the other peak is when they describe the culmination of philosophy, knowing the idea of the good and its character. So those are the two most important statements in the Republic. And yeah, you could say this. We human beings always, in some sense, desire to be ruled by the wise. We want the best, most reasonable men, the men who can truly guide us toward what is truly just, what is truly virtuous. We want those men to be in charge. The problem, of course, is how do we know who those men are? How would we recognize it? In political life, human beings with power, the many or those with arms, always in some sense dictate the terms of political life. and they don't know how to recognize who the wise are. And frankly, philosophers are naturally suspicious to many of us, to most of us, right? Philosophers seem to question our most cherished beliefs, or they don't seem to contribute, at least obviously, to normal political life. And so when one looks at philosophers around us, I'm thinking especially in the Greek world, but it's true in some sense in ours too, one wonders, are these people actually good? If there are real philosophers, are they actually good, or do they not corrupt people in some sense? Do they make people worse or more vicious by stripping or undermining some of the moral convictions that we hold to be true?
Well, Dan, doesn't he also
bad? Are they just useless? Yeah,
they leave in book 6. Book 5, you said that's the key. Philosophers should be king. But then in book 6, on line 495, these men for whom philosophy is most suitable go thus into exile and leave the city abandoned. They don't want to do this. This is not what they enjoy doing. They don't want to run things.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could say the whole effort is to see how far you can go in marrying, you could say, the two poles of human existence: our political, moral, communal existence, and philosophy, and to try to marry those things, to try to make the rulers truly wise or reasonable, requires trying to build a regime that's truly hospitable to philosophy. And Socrates' suggestion throughout book 6, he's on defense in some sense in book 6, because he's responding to the charge, the natural suspicion of philosophers, which Adimantus lays out, and I was trying to sketch out, which is that they're either vicious or teachers of vicious men, or they're useless. And Socrates' counter response is, look, in normal politics and normal political life, philosophers are powerless, and it's political life, not philosophy, that actually corrupts men. And in that situation, the philosophers sort of stand outside like men in a storm, trying just to avoid the chaos and the destruction, because they can't actually do much good. If you want the philosophers to do good, you have to actually design a regime that is suitable for them, that's open to rule by philosophy.
Now, as a result of this tension, Dr. Arnn, have the genuine political theorists you've known wanted any part of power?
I was just doing a thought experiment. I don't know who the chairman of the philosophy department at Harvard is, but I'm confident that I would not want him to be a king. I do know who the chairman of the philosophy department at Hillsdale College is, Lee Cole, a splendid man. I'm confident that he would not want to be king. And I was sitting here imagining a conversation among him and half a dozen people who are his closest friends around here, and I'm one of them. And let's say he became king for 10 years. And then that's over, and everybody's having dinner and a drink. And they're all repining and regretting what he lost. So that's, it's not, yeah, that'd be
that gives me a chance at this point.
How would you know who they are?
We know who they are, but they do not go into politics. My general observation about today is nobody wants any part of this if they are at all inclined to the big question.
I judge Winston Churchill and Abe Lincoln as very high on the statesmanship thing. And one thing they have in common is that they explicitly valued thought higher than they valued power. And, just look at the distinctions, right? Adolf Hitler was an oppressor of anybody who claimed an independent standard of right outside him.
Yeah.
And Lincoln and Churchill were protectors of that. And, if you look for disease abroad in the land today, we are prosecuting people quite a lot for what they say these days, aren't we? And
we are, and that's a big issue in the election, is whether or not we are doing that, and people have noticed. We will find out if people have noticed, because we are doing it, and it is contrary to our political history to do it. But boy, did the people pay it back. Oh, did they pay it back in spades. No more weaponization of DOJ, Donald Trump. Jack Smith is going to be gone before Donald Trump shows up, I think.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Relief Factor studio. It's the Hillsdale Dialogue, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu with Dr. Larry Arnn and Professor Daniel O'Toole. Time to talk about a couple of kings. Professor O'Toole, I have a question, just a straight-up question. When he argues at the end, Socrates says, these two things are, and he emphasis on the word are, and one is king of the intelligible class and region, while the other king is king of the visible, opposing the intelligible and the visible. He also uses geometry and physics to do this, and like my worst classes ever, geometry and physics. What is he saying when he opposes the intelligible and the visible?
Well, it's massively complicated. What he's doing there, what he's doing there is he's talking about the idea of the good and suggesting that the fundamental objects of knowledge, the things that we most need to know, are things that we can only grasp fundamentally in the mind. We can only see their purity and perfection in the mind, and they don't exist in the world around us. They're not merely objects of sense perception, like a dog or the trees around us. And so the objects that the mind truly needs to grasp are the character, for instance, of the virtues, the character of justice, what a fully just city would look like. These are things you can only grasp in the mind. And ultimately, he suggests that the highest object of understanding, the most fundamental object of understanding, is what is good. And his suggestion is, in a way, what's good rules over all objects of intellection. Now, what does that mean exactly? I mean, it's extremely complicated, but I would say at a very basic level, everything that we know of and we think about, we view in light of our concern with what is good for us. Everything in the world comes to light from within that perspective or horizon. We're always measuring things, evaluating things in terms of whether they are good or harmful, or they can potentially be useful, because our highest and greatest concern is with what is good. So Socrates' suggestion is, in a sense, our whole perception of all things, both in the mind and in the world around us, comes to light in terms of what is good or not. Now, just to answer your question, he's contrasting that with the world of mere sense perception, which in some vague sense you could think of as being ruled by the sun, because the sun is what's the source of growth and light that we experience in the world.
But is he offering the young men who are listening to him a choice between drawing rulers from those who are concerned with the higher things and those who are concerned with the lower things? Because our politics in the here and now, and we're not partisan, Hillsdale's not partisan, but our politics today is concerned with the here and the now. We're not looking for people who understand the good and the eternal. We're looking for people who understand the here and the now, aren't we?
Sure, but understanding what's good in the here and now requires not necessarily knowledge, but some decent sense of what is genuinely good eternally, right? I mean, you have to actually have a sense of what virtue is, what the real ends of politics are, what good character is, how human beings should live, the importance of the life of the mind. So those things that normal political men can understand on some level and look up to, they ought to have that understanding. That's what we're looking for. And unfortunately, we I think are ruled by people who don't have a clear understanding of those things, who have a radical conception of justice and what's possible, and who don't have a clear sense of what a thriving, natural human life is. And in fact, in many ways, wage war on those who want to preserve a decent, healthy, natural living.
A thriving natural life. All right, I like that thought. Hold on to that thought. Don't go anywhere, America. Don't go anywhere, because it's a complicated part of the book. We've got the two experts, Dr. Arnn and Dr. O'Toole, with us, except to hillsdale.edu. Or you can go to hughforhillsdale.com. We have many parts in the series on Plato's Republic, many parts. And we're beginning to get out of the election season. We're beginning to absorb the fact that transition is going. It's a great time to learn about governance and learn about the best that people can be and why theories often don't work out in practice. Go back and start at the beginning with the Hillsdale Dialogues, all 800 of them. Or you can just go back about 12 and you'll get the whole Republic. Stay tuned, except to go to hillsdale.edu or hughforhillsdale.com. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Hillsdale Dialogue underway. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. On the Hillsdale Dialogue, we've talked a lot about the administrative state over many, many decades, and I'm going to do it again now. I was going to pose this to Dr. Arnn, again with the proviso. We're not being political, though I'm going to use a political example here. The administrative state doesn't give a whit for the higher things. They care about their GS level, their ambit, their budget, their perpetuation. And onto the scene comes a very primal, not primitive, primal force, Donald Trump, saying, fight, 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 after he gets shot in the head. Is that the latter or is that the former? Is that fight, fight, fight an appeal to the higher things or to the lower things?
Well, first of all, you can't, as in Plato's Republic, the visible and the intelligible worlds are not separate for any of us, right? Because first of all, the sun lets us see a thing. But when we see a thing, we don't see just the thing. We also see what kind of thing it is. That's why we can talk and use common nouns. And that means that we know that that thing right there is a cup, right? And there are many cups. So the point is, it raises the question, or gives an answer even, to the ideal cup. That means we're always, each of us, always navigating between the visible and the intelligible. The visible and the intelligible affect each other in every instance, right? Now, there are people who have the kind of mind and the kind of commitment it takes both to seek the intelligible primarily. We call those people principally and primarily, mostly and at the beginning and at the end and in the middle, right? We call those people philosophers. And they come to understand the intelligible world better than those of us who just work with it all day, understanding that we do work with it all day. We have to. We try to make sense of the world. Now, you ask about that class of people, the administrative class in America. They're not different from us in that regard. They see the visible and the intelligible all the time. It's just that, and here we have to introduce a technical term of political philosophy that, however, you have to understand is familiar. You introduce the regime, which means the city, the system of laws and goods that organize thoughts like that, organize the navigation between the visible and the intelligible. And what's characteristic of the administrative class today, and less of ordinary people, which is the divide in America today, is that they are shaped by a regime that think that the intelligible and the visible can be collapsed, which is exactly the thought exercise that's going on in these two books of Plato.
What do you mean by collapsed?
It means you can follow rationality along any steps that can be said to lead to perfection, and you can make it real.
Okay.
Which is what they're doing here, right? We're going to take, I'm using him as my example, Mr. Lee Cole, Thomas Aquinas scholar. He's got 18 kids now, right? And you can make him king because he knows a lot of philosophy, right? But, and that's, he'd be, he's a man of many parts. He'd be certainly a very smart ruler. Would he be a good ruler? He would be quick to say not, and he wouldn't want to, see? And how would you get everybody to agree to him, right? We're abstracting from all those problems, right? Just to make a perfection, to make the visible world like the intelligible world that lives in conceptions. And that's the problem, right? In other words, the founders of America, one may congratulate them on their moderation. They overthrew the biggest power in the world and founded a new and different kind of republic, one model of which was a new order of the ages. What they never thought was that they were making something perfect. You see? And it's an explicit point in the very great book, The Federalist, the nation of philosopher kings is not going to come to be, which I think is also, but we'll let Dan tell us that, the lesson of Plato's Republic. And so we have to, a true philosopher will always be understanding what we are. And what we are is something divine and not God, right? And therefore, these thoughts that are inherent in every conversation we have, in every object we recognize, you can't remake the entire world in light of those thoughts because the world is stubborn and we are stubborn. See, you can see, by the way, the value of reading this book because these young people here, and there are, in my experience, both boys and girls who are like this, right? They want to get it right. They write crazy things. They learn one thing, and then they write. I just read one the other day. Wrote 400-word response to it, and the paper wasn't even written for me. And what he does is he learns one thing, and then he wants to reinterpret the whole world and all experience in light of that one thing. And what he's doing in his life, he's a fine young man, is he's doing the thought experience that Plato and Socrates are leading us through right now. And it's good for one to do that because you can understand the visible world better and its limits. And that's what's wrong today. Today, we're on a track to understand the limits of human perfection because we are attempting to pursue them. And by the way, the doctrines are not, the doctrines that underlie this alternative regime that has grew up in America, they're not as serious or solid as the doctrines that are evinced in Plato's Republic. And they're built on a contradiction, aren't they? And the contradiction is, it's in the heart of modern philosophy. The contradiction is, there isn't much use in building imaginary republics. Let's just get to work on the one in front of us and make that
interesting. Dr. O'Toole, why does Socrates single out for particular abuse the sophists? You'll have to explain to us what the sophists are and what they do and why are they his enemy.
Yeah. Well, the sophists are the professors. They're paid to share their wisdom, and they're teachers of rhetoric, and ultimately, I think they're kind of political scientists, frankly. The professors of political science, they're the bad guys. And, of course, early on, Thrasymachus...
I was hoping you'd say that, but I wasn't sure you would.
You wanted me to out... Yeah. Thrasymachus came to light as a part of the problem because he's promising a kind of rational expertise in tyranny, and what Socrates had showed is that Thrasymachus, in a way, hopes that reason and rhetoric can rule too much in politics. And Thrasymachus isn't clear, as my father-in-law said in one of these sessions, isn't really clear about what is fundamentally good or what it is we truly want. And that's what you have to think through. Now, in Book 6, where we discover that the two things about the Sophists. First of all, Thrasymachus and Socrates are now friends. They've made an alliance. So in some sense, I think Socrates had won Thrasymachus over by showing him, I'm not as naive about political life as you think, Thrasymachus. But secondly, in Book 6, what we're exploring is the possibility of philosophic rule. And for that to happen, the philosophers will need rhetoric of some sort. I mean, somehow you have to get those, again, with force or power in the regime on their side. And what Socrates practices, in part in the way in which he talks about the ideas and the eternal things, and the kind of mystical language with which he describes philosophy, is he's making philosophy look truly inspiring and beneficial and not dangerous for the political community. And so Socrates is employing a kind of rhetoric. Philosophers will need rhetoric if somehow they are going to enlist on their side the men with force in the community, just as Socrates enlists the support of Glaucon and Adeimantus, who are sort of stand-ins for the ruling aristocratic elite. And then what Socrates suggests quite radically is that in normal political life, the true sophist is the regime itself. And in a way that the people like Thrasymachus are fundamentally recycling opinions that they've learned from the political community itself. That sophists and professors, what do? They cater to their audience. They tell them things that they want to hear that are pleasing to them. And one of the things that the political community always teaches us is that what's best, what's noble, what's just, is doing the things that the community wants for us. So Thrasymachus had praised ruling, but what does ruling involve? It means serving the community. And Socrates suggests that in a way, the very best life isn't fundamentally oriented towards doing the things that the community itself thinks are necessary. So the sophists, the professors, are in some sense guided by and led by the biggest sophist, the political community itself.
All right, I want to bring it down. I'm going to have to chew on that. Yep. Glaucon is standing around, and one of my notes to ask Professor O'Toole and maybe Dr. Arnn, Glaucon quite ridiculously said, Apollo, what a demonic excess. Okay, why does Socrates take Glaucon out here and run over him this way? I mean, what did he do to deserve this? What he's done in the passage you're citing, he's described the idea of the good, and the idea of the good there has become a godlike entity. It's not merely, or doesn't seem merely to be what's good for us as individual human beings, which is sort of how he started by discussing the idea of the good. And stop right there, Professor O'Toole. I will say, if you want what's good for your 17-year-old or your 16 and 17 and you want what's good for you, Hillsdale.edu. Get the application in for next fall. Hillsdale.edu. Best place to go to college in America. You'll learn things. You'll be ready to thrive as an adult. Hillsdale.edu. Get the application. Send it to your nephews and nieces. Send it to everyone. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding. And we want you, or your son or daughter, to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Welcome back, America. About time to finish up today's Hillsdale Dialogue. But Professor O'Toole, you were talking about what Plato was driving at there. What is he getting at there?
He then drew out, you could say, what all men implicitly believe, or what they hope is the case, and what all political communities point to, which is that there's some fundamental principle in the universe, some fundamentally good principle that is underlying everything or finally guiding all things. And so, and that is simply good. It's the source of our ability to know. It's the source of all being. And Glaucon is struck by the beauty and what's inspiring about this image. And in some sense, what Socrates then has done, as he's won Glaucon over from his attachment simply to political idealism or to realizing justice within the world, and he's got him to see there's something even greater and higher. And that greater thing is philosophy itself. And philosophy transcends the political. So Glaucon is now an ally of philosophy, though the picture he has of philosophy is a religious and inspiring picture that one would then need to interrogate and think through. Well, what's the real character of philosophy?
Yeah, and that's why he says ridiculously.
Provisional.
Glaucon is an enthusiast for this idea, and Socrates doesn't say to him, you're being ridiculous. He thinks that's ridiculous. Now, Dr. Arnn, my closing question for you is at 490. Yeah, I got enough time. 494. Now, if someone were to gently approach the young man, and in this conversation that would also mean the young woman, to approach the young man and woman in this condition and tell them the truth, that he has no intelligence in him, although he needs it, and that it's not to be acquired except by slaving for its acquisition, do you think it will be easy for him to hear through a wall of so many evils? Is that what Hillsdale's trying to do?
Oh, yeah. Exactly. And it is also, I will add, that was very good what Dan just said about Glaucon, who was an enthusiast.
It was.
Is that that's what Socrates does to Glaucon, you see. and you know, I like to say that there are two levels of high ambition, and one of them is, I just want to get my way, and the other is, I want to know what to do. And those two things are related. And it's so good for young people. If a young person is not ambitious, then they're less interesting, to me at least. But if they're just ambitious in some low way, they're also not interesting.
Yeah.
And so they have to learn that combination of arrogance and humility.
Well, what I loved
learn,
about this is they said you must gently approach a young man in this condition who wants to know things. But you can't overpower them. And I kept coming back. You've mentioned a few times you give the honor code talk at the college every year. That's not gentle, is it?
No, I think I would just amend a little bit what Socrates said. If you can overpower them, you ought not to be talking to them because it's a waste of time. And, you can't, and I mean that widely, too. I mean, I think, for example, in the charter schools that we have, right, there's, I don't know how many kids there are, but maybe there's 15 to 20,000. But the wait list is half as big as the student body overall. And what do you learn when you're thinking of sending your kid to one of these charter schools? You're going to have to learn Latin. And that's a really good thing, right? Because forget for a minute that Latin is one of the two great Western languages of the ancient world and the father of many languages, or mother. It also has the reputation for being difficult. And that's handy, too. And, and so the point is people flock to make that choice for their kids, knowing it's going to be a pain in the butt to them to have to do it, right?
They're going to be sitting there declining nouns with them.
Homework.
They're going to be memorizing tenses, and it's not easy. It's hard, but they want to do it.
Yeah, and it's good. And so the point is, that's ambition, and and the highest kind of ambition to know and be good. And it's only taken to its ultimate states in the few who entirely give their lives to the intelligible world. We're using that phrase now, right? And that's rare. None of us on this call has done that, by the way.
Oh, absolutely not. At least not on this end. But I do know how to keep a clock.
Dan, by the way, maybe more than we. But
well, I hope so.
But everybody feels the attraction of that, and you see that take over Glaucon, and that's civilizing, moderating, and productive of courage to do.
And
that.
we will be back to that next week with Book 7 and Part 13 of the Republic. We weave in and out of the present as we do this, as all good conversation does. Thank you, Professor O'Toole. Thank you, Dr. Arnn. That's it. Thank you, Harley and Adam and Generalissimo. That we'll see you on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.